Aha! Hi, nice to meet you.
How are you doing?
Good, how
What's
are you?
your name?
I'm Greg, nice to
Hi,
meet you.
Greg.
Okay, so I feel like you're getting at this idea of polysemy, where we have multiple related meanings for a word, right? Like, for example, a famous painting can be emotionally moving in that it changes my emotional state. And when I was on the highway coming here to the studio, I was physically moving, I was changing my position. If I said, I believe the Mona Lisa is very moving, and you said, you don't really understand what you're saying, it's nailed to the wall, I would say that you're the one who doesn't understand what I'm saying, not the other way around. And the way that relates to this is there are many concepts of God, and I'll admit, I find a lot of what you say about that interesting. I'm familiar with it. The idea of this kind of Jungian hierarchical thing, or as a metaphor or a symbol, or the kind of, atheist, materialist, literalist idea of a agentic, omnipotent, omniscient being that intervenes in reality, right? So when I'm saying that I reject the concept of God, I'm aware of these other definitions of God, but I think that when we use words, we tend to only imply one meaning at a time. So the same way that I would say the Mona Lisa is moving emotionally, but I would not say it's moving physically. I would say I reject the concept of God in this very literal way. But
What literal way?
the way that God is this omniscient, omnipotent, agentic, supernatural being that sent his son down and has, caused miracles and all these things like that. The idea of God is
Do you think that there's an underlying unity of things?
Could you explain that question?
Well, scientists, for example, believe that science unifies in a comprehensive theory. Do you, yes, no, or that there are multiple competing truths? Those are the options. Either things unify or there are multiple competing truths.
I know that, for example, like in physics, people are looking for like a theory of everything.
And why do you think they're doing that?
It's interesting, it's helpful.
But they also believe that there's an underlying unity to things.
In a sense, yeah, like like the material world and time and space are probably governed by universal laws and principles?
Partly that, yes, yes, but that the same thing might extend to a broader domain that would include imagination and value.
Could you help me connect that to the prompt?
Well, I'm trying to define God, the God that I don't think atheists do a very good job of defining. Here's another question for you. What do you think guides you in your determination of whether or not what you're saying to me is true?
Can we go back? Can we stay on what we were talking about?
We are.
Okay.
You're just uncomfortable with the question.
No, I feel like you're just kind of throwing different spaghetti at the wall.
I'm not.
Okay.
I asked you a very specific question. What is it that you think guides you when you're talking to me to help you determine whether what you say is true?
Logic, memory, reasoning, sensory information.
How do you distinguish that from being governed by something that's false?
An interesting question.
How do you know the difference when you speak between what's true and what's false? So you could imagine.
Right? I can infer.
From what principles?
So, and what are you getting at?
I'm getting at the fact that your conscience guides you. Is that reasonable?
Conscious is defined by
conscience.
My empathy and my reason are my foundational.
Define it any way you want.
Okay, so that's how I'm defining my conscience. Is my my conscience is my sense of
right and
wrong. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Where does that come from?
I would say that comes from an evolved capacity to empathize and a recognition of the benefits of engaging with and nurturing that capacity. And then that empathy is constrained and guided by reason, right? Like, for example, I am driving down the highway, there's a kitten in the road. I'm going to empathetically feel, oh my God, I want to save the kitten, but then reasonably, like I'm going to get hit by a car, right? So that's sort of the process through which I make ethical decisions.
Okay,
how do you constrained by reason?
Do you think that people can differ in their response to something empathically?
Yeah.
Is there a mediating principle that can tell you one person who's empathic and another person who's empathic that disagree, who's correct?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we'd have to, talk it out, right? We do that in real life all the time when we have, whether that's a discussion with a friend about the right thing to do in a situation, whether that's a policy discussion about law, right? That's where we can converse with each other, think about things, explain our perspectives, and then kind of reach a conclusion, right? That I think that we do that all the time.
So Elijah, the prophet Elijah, defined God in the Old Testament as the voice of conscience within.
Okay.
That's a definition.
So you're saying by that definition of God, See, this kind of goes back to what I'm saying initially.
I'm not defining it. Elijah defined
Okay, so
it.
as Elijah defines
It's
God.
defined that way in Jonah, too.
Okay, so as
Cardinal Newman also
got
defined it that way.
as I'm sure you know many people who've defined it that way, and it's impressive. You're a very knowledgeable person.
I'm not trying to be impressive. I'm just pointing out to you how God is defined in the Old Testament.
All right. So to respond to that, I do think there are lots of interesting ways to define God. And that goes back to my kind of opening
Then how do we
statement.
specify what we're arguing about?
We use context clues, or again, it goes back to my example of the Mona
I'm
Lisa.
defining God as conscience.
Okay. So that's interesting, but then you're kind of expanding the meaning of
No,
God.
I'm not. That's how it's defined in the Old Testament.
Okay,
in
so
Elijah and in Jonah.
Sure. So whoever, so some.
It's not whoever.
Okay.
Elijah is one of the major
All right.
Old Testament
All right.
prophets.
All
Right?
right.
He's equal in stature to Moses.
Okay.
Right. So it's not arbitrary.
All right. So that is interesting, but it's not relevant to the context with which I am using the term God.
It's directly relevant. Atheists reject God, but they don't
Right,
understand
but
what they're rejecting.
you're
You
being-
accept conscience as a guide, and conscience is one of the defining characteristics of God in the Old
I
Testament.
think you're being intellectually disingenuous
In what way?
because, again,
I asked you if you
hey,
believe that conscience guided you.
You just asked me a question and then you stopped me from answering it. In this setting, you understand the way I am using the term God and belief.
Not
and
in
then
the least. I don't understand how you're using it in the least. That's why I'm trying to define it. My definition of God as conscience is a lot more precise and oriented than your definition of the God that you
But
hypothetically disbelieve in.
it's irrelevant to the fault lines of this debate.
How is it irrelevant?
Because in common parlance, when we're talking about atheists, God, belief, not belief,
I
we're
don't
not
care
talking.
about common parlance. I'm trying to get to something fundamental.
I think your point is irrelevant to the way that people tend
Which
to use
point?
these words. Your point that there are these polysemous
I didn't make
ideas
that
of
point.
God.
You did.
I
made a specific
characterized
point
it,
that God
right.
was associated with conscience.
I just feel like you kind of retreat into this semantic fog.
I'm not retreating at all. I'm advancing, sir. You are retreating.
All right. Well, it was very nice to meet you.
Nice
I appreciate
to meet
the
you too.
conversation.
Yeah. It's very brave of you to do this.
Thank you.